Portage la Prairie. Portage la Prairie. Portage la Prairie. Portage. Portage la Prairie. Portage la Prairie. Great place to visit. Portage la Prairie. When I come to Portage, I like to be shown over. I like to go to 7-Eleven. I like porridge. In the morning, I eat porridge. Porridge. In the morning. In the morning, I eat porridge. In porridge. Yeah.
You are listening to Unscripted Moments, a podcast about propaganda. On this episode, we have a special Winnipeg guest, Chris Friesen of the experimental electronic music moniker FreakingSnap. On this episode, Chris and I discuss the early 90s Winnipeg music scene, his love of Red Fisher, Giant Sons, propaganda, and also his cover of Portage la Prairie, which is easily the weirdest propaganda song ever made. We also discuss, at the end, Chris's brush with death in 2021 and emerging back into the world as a social person at the Propaganda Hometown shows of October 2021. You can find Chris on Twitter at FreakingSnap. And so without further delay, please enjoy Portage la Prairie Part 2. Chris Friesen, welcome to Unscripted Moments, a podcast about propaganda.
Thanks for having me.
I am delighted that you're here, Chris. Can you just kind of tell the audience out there a little bit about who you are, introduce yourself just a tad, and who you are and what you do?
My name is Chris Friesen, and I am a human being that lives in the city of Winnipeg, Manitoba, North America, Canada. And which is famously known as being the home of the subjects of the podcast, propaganda.
I love it. Well, Chris, and you have a sort of let's call it a musical project known as FreakingSnap. And I'm wondering if you can tell everybody out there a little bit about your musical project, which is extremely expansive at this point. And you have an astounding amount of musical tracks available for people to listen to. Tell us about your music a little bit.
All right. As you said, it's called FreakingSnap, and it's a project that I've been working under that moniker for just about 7 years, give or take a few months either side of the 7 years. And I usually kind of tell people that I just make weird ass elevator music.
Yeah.
basically it's one of those things where it's like I record like pretty much everything that I make
Yeah.
with the entire intention initially, maybe still possibly following through with this idea of creating just enough music to fill up an iPod Classic. I'm still undecided about whether or not I'm going to follow through with just cutting it at when I fill up an iPod Classic
Yeah.
or not. It's up for debate because I'm still having way too much fun. But right now, I'm still sitting at a 2/3 of my iPod Classic is full of my own stuff.
Awesome.
And yeah, I record using uh well, I have two of them now, but it's called a Korg Chaos pad, and basically it's like a juiced up version of like those 80s Casios with all the presets. And it's basically something that has like a crap ton of presets on it, and you can it's got a setting where you can record things for 2 bars worth of stuff, and then you can chop it up, record stuff on top of that and loop it and just go nuts ad nauseum. And that's pretty much what I use. And my favorite part about it is the fact that the second that I turn these things off, everything is gone.
Mm.
So each time I turn them on, it's something completely brand new, which is why I record everything.
Dude, that is wild. So you're not actually like setting out with like a purposeful vision of like making a song and then reworking it in demo form until you have it right. Like essentially what comes out is the final product. Am I hearing you right?
Yeah.
Man,
Yeah.
that's great.
And
I feel like I should do this. I feel like everybody should do this.
oh, absolutely. Like my process in terms of actually like putting together a release is usually kind of I'll record say something for 45 minutes or so, and then when I dump that onto my laptop into the audio editing, usually you can find spots where that would be that would be a good spot for that 5 minutes is a good chunk that would make
Mm.
a nice little piece. So you take that and you save that as like, we'll just use today's date, just go August 27th, part 1.
Sweet.
And then, find the next spot that makes a nice logical spot. It's like August 27th, part 2. And then what I'll do is invariably at different points is put in all of those unnamed things and hit random and go, okay, this piece and that piece and that piece and that piece are now a collection. So I'll have pieces from August 27th, August 26th, August 25th that all just like may or may not actually line up properly in terms of like their what I was doing at the time, but
Mm-hmm.
it works. Sometimes the most random things just work out the best ways.
Well, Chris, I want to hear more about Winnipeg. So right now you have this project FreakingSnap, which is a series of bleeps and bloops that you essentially, manufacture and record live. But I'm curious about your origin in the Winnipeg music scene because you and I have been chatting on Twitter and Facebook for a long, long time at this point. Basically, since the podcast kind of came out, you've been kind of on the periphery of the show's social media presence. And I'm just curious about your story in Winnipeg itself, and like because you go back a ways from what I can tell. So tell me some of that back in the day stuff. Tell me some history.
Okay. Well, let's put it this way. I moved from a tiny village of about 50 people to Winnipeg in 1990 after
Okay.
graduating high school. So basically I'm just a tiny bit younger than Chris and George.
Okay.
Um, when I moved here, I would like I've been obsessed with music my entire life. Um, so moving to Winnipeg and finally actually being able to see live music
Hmm.
in a close up front environment was just like, oh my fucking word, I have just arrived.
Yeah.
This is the greatest thing ever. And and I've got an older brother who's 5 years older, and he was already here, and I moved in with him, and he took me to the Albert, the Spectrum, Wellingtons, you name it. If there was live music going on, we were going to it.
Yeah.
And and it was at a time when uh, I've heard it talked about on the podcast before, but I think Conrad mentioned it in one of in the Toothpick Hercules Leg Hold Trap episode
Yes.
about draft night Thursdays at the
Hmm.
Albert, and it was literally a thing that everybody went to every Thursday. It did not matter who was playing. You went to the Albert on Thursday.
Man,
Um,
it's a ritual.
exactly, it was a ritual. But at the same point, if if whoever was playing, you decided that evening that they sucked, you would just walk down the street to Wellington's and see what was going on there.
Yeah.
And if there wasn't anything going on there, you walked a couple of blocks to the Spectrum to see what was going on there. And then at that point, if that one wasn't really grabbing your interest, you kind of just went, you flipped a coin and went, okay, which of the three did I like the best?
Hmm.
And you went back to that. Um, like there's a number of shows that I actually, I don't really regret things, because anything that you didn't do or you do makes you who you are.
Sure.
So there's no real purpose in actually like just going, well, I regret I didn't do that. Um, but there are a couple of shows that I regret not going to, like things like walking home from the restaurant that I was working at the time, and going past the Spectrum and seeing a lineup of people and going, oh, who's playing? And person in the line goes, oh, it's Sarah McLaughlin.
Oh,
And I go,
cool.
you go, oh, how much is it? They're like, oh, $10. It's like, that's out of my price range for tonight. And you leave and you go home. The very next time that Sarah McLaughlin came through town, it was at a large theater for like $60.
Yeah.
So I sat there and just went, man, I could have seen her in a very small venue, and there's a couple other things where it's like, no means no.
Yeah.
Uh, a coworker had told me, he's like, oh my God, no means no is playing the Spectrum. You have to go. And I'm like, I don't know who they are
Oh,
at this
yeah.
point. And how much does this show? And he's like, oh, it's $15. And I'm like, ah, I'm a I'm a very poor university student that's working in a shitty restaurant. I can't afford $15 for that. Ah. And then I ended up going to Records on Wheels a couple of days later, and then they had a copy of Wrong on cassette that somebody had sold back to them, and it was in their used block of tapes. And I'm like, oh, $4 for a cassette. I'll buy that. Took it home, listened to it, and went, fuck me, I was stupid.
Because it's like one of the best records ever.
Exactly. And pretty much every single time No Means No has come through town since that time, I have gone to go see them.
Hmm.
However, that was the last tour that they played here in Winnipeg with Andy Kerr on guitar and vocals.
Oh, bummer. So you missed the last Andy tour.
Yeah, so I missed the last Andy tour. That being said, Tom Holliston is a fucking genius as well.
Oh, absolutely. You can't go wrong seeing any iteration of No Means No. But, it's one of those things where it's like that would have been just such a special memory of seeing Andy up there belting it out too.
Yeah, and Andy is just an absolutely special musician as well. Like it's
Absolutely.
just mind blowing how great that band was, whatever the case may be. My favorite band at the time was Red Fisher,
Oh, yeah.
and And actually, the shitty restaurant that I worked at when I didn't go to actually see Sarah McLachlan, Jason Tate, the drummer for Red Fisher, and later on Weaker Thans, was one of the fellow line cooks there. It's just, it's like classic Winnipeg. Everything is uh, like there's the game of 6 degrees of Kevin Bacon.
Hmm.
Winnipeg, it's like 3 degrees.
Where does Propagandy sort of first come onto your radar? Because this is like, if you're talking about 1990, 91, you're talking about like pre-Fat Records. You're talking about before really anybody outside of Winnipeg really knows much about Propagandy. So where do they sort of enter the picture for you?
Um, in terms of like actually remembering that I'm seeing Propagandy, not
Yeah.
until much later. Um, like I am one of those people that, in terms of the so-called punk rock that I was listening to, um, it was always very melodic. The singers were very, I don't want to say smooth, but they also had very melodic vocals. Like Big Drill Car is still one of my favorite bands from that period of time. Like that kind of punk rock was the stuff that I was like really into. And I know I saw Propagandy before John joined, so it would have been with Hopper. Um, and I would have seen them tons with John, but they were always a band that, because of Chris's snotty vocal style at the time, I couldn't stand him.
Interesting.
Like musically, I enjoyed it because it was like, like sort of in that same melodic style of punk rock, but I did not like any kind of music overall at that point in time that had that kind of a snotty, put on voice.
Hmm.
And it just really sounded like, because to me it always just really sounded really forced in terms of his vocal thing.
Hmm.
Um, but it's like my favorite, like you're probably gonna hate me, but my favorite song on How to Clean Everything is Showdown, because of the John part. And like the only reason that I even owned a copy of How to Clean Everything, because I still didn't like them at the time, was entirely because I was obsessed with, like, okay, local band, I have to buy their stuff.
Sure. Yeah, of course. I mean, especially when they get signed to like, a label in the States and like they're kind of like, getting some attention from around the continent and not just as like a hyper local band. I mean, that kind of stands out too,
Yeah. And so it was exactly that. Like, and like that's why I still have the 7 inch of How to Clean a couple of things.
Yeah.
Like like I bought the split with I Spy because I'd seen I Spy and I thought they were the fucking shit. They were so good.
Yeah. Amazing. Where did you see I Spy? Where did they come into your musical picture?
Um, I would have seen them probably at the Albert, at Wellington's, um, probably a couple other spots in the city. Um, but yeah, like they were just one of those. I think guaranteed probably one of them was a show with Propagandy at some point, because
Awesome.
like they were friends and everything. So the likelihood of that is pretty high. Um,
Nice.
I do remember one Propagandy show where they played at the West End and they set up on the floor.
Hmm. I think I've heard
And
about this show before.
and my memory says that either Chris or John said something about, yeah, we're setting up on the floor in the corner over here because we're not corporate like everybody else that's playing on the stage.
Nice.
You know,
Oh
like
man, that's just such a dig too at all the other bands that are at the show.
yeah. So it's like that probably would have been like a show that they would have played with Malfaction and Meat Rack and Red Fisher probably as well. Like, because any show that you went to go see Red Fisher, the likelihood that you saw anybody from any of the other bands in the scene, either at the show or also playing the show, very high. So, and the number of times that I saw Red Fisher, the likelihood that there was probably at least 50 times that Propaganda played those shows, I saw them so many times that it's not even funny.
Yeah.
And but the worst part is the fact that I look back on it now and go, wow, I saw them so many times and I hated them then, but now I really love them and I barely ever get a chance to see them.
Yeah. When did you start to come around on Propaganda though? Because obviously you love them now.
Yeah.
When did they kind of win you over?
Um, Basically in 1996. Uh, I would go probably, I can't narrow down the exact month per se, but probably around late spring, early summer, whenever Less Talk More Rock came out. Because and it's very specifically 1996 because that's the year that my daughter was born.
Mm-hmm.
And before she was born, I was living in a house with a bunch of friends, um, and another mutual friend had come over with a copy of Less Talk More Rock, and we just sat in the living room and listened to it. And I just went, "Huh, he can actually sing.
Nice.
This is awesome."
Yeah. And
Thank you.
and what's really cool about Let's Talk More Rock too is especially because you were loving the more melodic stuff on Showdown, is that John sings so much more on Let's Talk More Rock than he does on How to Clean Everything.
Exactly. And I won't lie, like when the Weaker Thans put out their first record, I was fucking blown away. Like
Nice.
it was fucking awesome. But I also wasn't really surprised about how awesome it was
Yeah.
because I'd already had a cassette copy of Slips and Tangles.
Yeah.
Like
Do you still
I
have it?
knew I have it somewhere.
Oh man, you got to dig that out and send me pictures of it. I want to see some pictures. Did you get in on the ground, the first floor of like right when the Weaker then started putting out music? Were you there like right in the beginning? Did you see any of those really early shows? Because I have seen some videos of them playing at Wellington's for like 10 people before on YouTube.
Yeah, I know it's not their first show that I saw because Jason actually in a private message I'd actually asked him like, was this Wellington show your first show? He's like, no, we actually played one before that.
Mm,
So I saw the second show and it was at Wellington's and Steve Carroll hadn't even joined the band yet.
got it.
So it was just Samson, John Sutton on bass, and Jason Tate playing drums.
Excellent, excellent.
And it wasn't really too much longer after that Steve Carroll joined.
Nice. Do you so I know that recently you got a chance to catch up with Beeve and David to catch from Giant Sons, and I know that you were a huge fan of them. Do you have any like Giant Sons commentary, since I've had every member of the band on this podcast at this point, and I love their stuff, and I know I'm just curious about your appreciation of that band too.
Okay, well, first and foremost, all three of those guys are really wonderful, wonderful people. Um, Absolutely wonderful people. Uh, but my origin story for Giant Sons is actually seeing March December Swing.
Okay. Robbie brought them up on the show before, and this is kind of a mystery to me, so please go on.
Okay, I can't I honestly can't remember exactly why I went to the show that I saw them play, but it was at the West End Cultural Center, and March December Swing played, and I just remembered like, damn, these guys are really fucking good. Like I really like these guys. And then I remember introducing myself to them afterwards, and because Winnipeg is small, and once you introduce yourself to a band somewhere, every time you guys bump into each other, it's like, oh hey, how's things going? Hey, nice to see you again. Good to see you too. And you get to know people, over a drink at the Albert or whatever. And I actually got to know Kevin, the bass player, really well. Like we're still, like, I'd say I'm closer friends with Kevin than the other guys,
Mm-hmm.
especially at that point in time. And I remember visiting Kevin at his work, which was a record store at the time, and him going, yeah. Um, so just to let you know, the March December swing just broke up, and well, literally, it's actually just I left because they want to go in a direction that I'm not particularly interested in. And I'm like, oh, what's that? And Robbie talked about it in terms of, like, that Americana sound, like the Bruce Springsteen stuff.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and I was like, oh, that's kind of interesting. Well, we'll see how that turns out. And lo and behold, whether it was a year later or a few months later, somebody mentioned that, hey, they're playing a show as Giant Sons, and I'm thinking, okay, cool, this is going to be that Americana thing,
Yeah.
and it's this three-piece instrumental thing, and I'm like, okay, thank fucking God that it's this, because this fucking rips.
Yeah. They're so amazing. I sent somebody a Giant Sun song today on like an Instagram DM. Somebody was like, hey, can I hear the original version of Tertium Non Dater? And I sent it over to them and they were like, whoa, this is absolutely amazing. I was like, I know, man, I'm telling you, Giant Suns is where it's at.
Yeah, and like I've got both of the CDs that they put out that was compiled into the G7 re-release much later.
Yeah.
And it's like, uh, I mentioned in the private message earlier about how I can tie my own stuff specifically to Giant Sons.
Ooh, good. Keep going.
And it's because on the first EP that they put out, the last track on it is a remix of the previous tracks,
Okay.
all four together, done by a electronic artist that goes by the name Blunders Public.
I've heard of Blunders Public. We've interacted on Twitter a little bit.
Yeah, and he's a really sweet guy. He's one of the best people out there. But Blunders Public also remixed one of my previous projects pieces of work. So, yeah, by transitive property,
Mhm.
we've worked together.
I love it. Well,
Like I know I also played a couple, at least one, maybe two shows with Giant Sons, with that project that Blunders Public did the remix for.
yeah.
Um, like so, it's just one of those things where it's like Winnipeg, everybody actually does know each other, and if you are friends and you want to play a show together, it'll happen.
Man, I love it. Well, Chris, over the last 2.5 years or so, I've lost track at this point how many covers listeners and musicians have sent into the podcast. And it's one of my favorite things about doing the show is like seeing what comes up. And, in a message where I was chatting with you and Sam Thompson, the host of Witch Police Radio, I was like, oh yeah, you should do a propaganda cover with FreakingSnap. And hilariously, I didn't know how you made your FreakingSnap music. And I didn't really know that you were essentially experimenting in real time and recording it and then putting out those versions. I didn't know that that's how you made it. So doing a cover is almost like it's almost like kind of like the opposite of what it is that you actually do with FreakingSnap. Does that make sense?
Oh yeah, absolutely. Like, I initially took the that particular comment because it was on Twitter, and I took that comment and I'm like, oh shit, that's funny. But how funny would it be if I actually did one?
I know.
How the fuck would I do one?
Yeah.
And then
Well,
and then it just like was one of those things where it's just like, oh, because of the fact that I'm actually listening to the podcast in order.
yeah,
Um, on that particular day that we were exchanging that, I listened to the Portage la Prairie episode,
amazing.
and it was like, huh, I think I can do this one.
Yeah. Well, this is clearly the most appropriate selection for you in the style of what it is that you do. And so you did choose Portage la Prairie to cover with FreakingSnap. And before we talk about the song anymore, I actually want to play the whole thing right now so that people can hear it and then they can hear us break it down a little bit. So yeah, so here is FreakingSnap for the next 41 seconds with Portage la Prairie.
Portage la Prairie, 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 great place to visit. Portage la Prairie. When I come to Portage, I like to be shown around. I like to go to 7-Eleven. I like porridge in the morning. I eat porridge. I need porridge in the morning. In the morning, I eat porridge in porridge. Yeah, yeah. So I just wanna say one thing, and that is, come on, yeah, come on, man.
Okay, so Chris, I want to know about the creation of this cover. Tell me what you did in order to kind of plan it out and how this sort of came together. Tell me the story.
Okay, well, as we discussed before, it was a kind of a joke comment that on Twitter that erupted into, holy fuck, I'm actually going to try and figure out how to do this.
Oh, absolutely.
And it's one of those things where it's like I went back and I re-listened to the original track a couple of times, and just thought about it, and thought about a number of different approaches that I could possibly try to do, and just ended up just going, okay, I I don't know what I'm going to do, but I'm sitting here with my shit in front of me, ready to go, and I just started, playing something. And at the end of a recording session, I saved it, brought it over onto the computer, and put it up. It's like, okay, that part, I think I might be able to use that part to, you know, try to sing the words to Portage la Prairie.
Mm-hmm.
And went, okay, what are the words? Greg, I need the words.
Yeah, and then it
And
took me forever to send it to you. I felt so bad.
and well, you followed through. You sent me the words,
Yeah.
and then I tried to figure out, like, okay, how, because I'm not a guy that really does vocals at all anymore.
Right.
My very first musical project, I actually sang, played bass, and wrote lyrics. But I don't do that anymore. And there's a legitimate reason, because I don't really have anything to say in terms of lyrical content, and my memory for remembering lyrics is just like fucking terrible.
Mm.
So I took I was like, okay, let's figure out if I can actually do this with my laptop with the microphone that's on the laptop. And just went to that part on the track that I thought would work, and basically hit record, and brought up the lyric sheet that you sent me, and went full bore into just singing it. And I sang it like 3 or 4 times in a row. And I think it was probably the second one was the best version of singing it, and just went, okay, I'll use that one, and put put that sec that session of lyrics of singing to the part of music that I wanted to use, and then went, okay, since I'm already doing a propaganda cover that is the most absurd song that they've got,
Yeah.
um, let's get really absurd with the vocals too, and just like, fuck around with the um, effects that are on the program that I use, and fuck around with the vocals. And thusly, you get 41 seconds of FreakingSnap covering propaganda.
Dude, I love the vocal effect. I mean, it just really put it over the top for me.
Well, I know that it gave Keith a good laugh.
Oh, good. Has he heard it?
Yeah, I sent it to him, and just basically, when I know you're super busy. Uh, Congratulations on the move, the new job, etc. I know everything's stressful. Here's 41 seconds of me singing Portage la Prairie. I hope that puts a smile on your face. And I got a
Man,
message
I
back
love it.
about I got a message back like 5 minutes later, just going, dude, you succeeded. There was a smile on my face.
I love it. Well, and something that really surprises me is that the lyrics are actually available in that box set, that Recess Records double 7-inch and 5-inch box set. I couldn't believe it whenever I actually opened up that liner note on the inside of that box set, and then the lyrics of the song were actually written down. You would think that this would be the kind of song where it's like, oh, there's no way we're going to include the lyrics to that song in the liner notes. But sure enough, man, there they are. So I think I just sent you a picture of the inside of the actual liner notes, didn't I?
Yeah, but I will also say that it's also very important that the lyrics are there,
Yeah, I
because
agree,
it's
because that's
super
the only
absurd.
place.
Because it's super absurd,
Yeah.
and it's one of those things where it's like, I kind of what's the word? I obsess with absurdity within things. Like, we'll go back to early propaganda. Like, I didn't really like them, but I loved the absurdity of their humor.
Yeah. You
Like,
know,
the fact
this,
that they were so smart,
right.
even at that point in time, like they were so smart, like in terms of like politics and everything, and social issues and everything else. But they wrapped it up in you know fart and poop jokes.
Yeah. And this is an interesting tune for me as well, because even though it's a joke and even though it's super silly, this is almost kind of like an endearing and sweet song as well, because it's kind of like you know, a little love letter to their original hometown. You know what I mean? Like, do you find it like sweet and endearing kind of in that way as well?
Oh, absolutely. There's nothing quite like, a silly little love letter to where you're from.
Yeah. I'm wondering, Chris, you mentioned earlier that you're from a town of around 50 people. originally, and I'm wondering if you were going to do a Portage la Prairie, if there are any details that stand out in your mind for your 50-person hometown that you grew up in. Like, what would you put in a kind of like little goofy love letter electronic track if you were doing something like this for your hometown? Do any details stand out to you?
I would probably say something about Graysville Elementary School,
Mm-hmm.
um, the ice rink that we had that was right beside it, and right beside it was a curling rink. Um, Probably mentioned something about the fact that there was only like 4 streets in the town, and stow seeds, my very first job,
Nice.
where I licked envelopes for an hour once a week.
Man, I love that. Um, Chris, I got something else I want to ask you about real quick. You and I were both at the October 2021 Propaganda hometown shows. Did you just go to one of the shows, or were you at more than one?
I just went to the one.
Okay, cool. So we were definitely both there, and I know that you had a really wild few months leading up to that show. Um, and I'm wondering if you can just kind of tell the audience kind of what you were going through in the lead up to being at that same propaganda show that I was at with Sam.
Well, the short version is that I nearly died.
Mm-hmm.
The longer version is that um, over a long period of time, my aortic valve in my heart was slowly degrading and failing to the point where, and this is one of those things where it's like, I don't ever want to say thank you to wildfires and smoke in the air, but because last summer here in Winnipeg, there was a lot of smoke in the air from a bunch of wildfires all over the place. Um, it was wreaking havoc on my ability to breathe,
Mm,
and I went into the hospital thinking that I was I was like that the only thing that was wrong with me was something involving my lungs because of all the smoke and everything. And it turned out after a couple of days of being admitted and going in for observation and a bunch of scans, that my aortic valve was pumping at a 14% ejection fraction rate,
mm,
which basically means that um, I was not getting proper oxygen and blood being pumped to my brain, and I was slowly becoming a very angry human being because nothing was properly going to my brain, and I
right.
was so my physical body was like retaining water, so I was gaining weight and getting fat and all that kind of stuff. Um, if anybody's actually watched the movie Filmage, there's a part where Bill Stevenson is talking about gaining weight because of the aneurysm in, or because of the tumor in his brain,
Right.
and and how he's like, oh, this is just how Bill gets old, and that's how I felt at the time leading up going into the hospital.
Got it.
And when they figured out what actually was wrong with me, it was like, okay, immediately, this is what's wrong. Here's the plan. And on September 14th of 2021, I went into surgery and they replaced my failing aortic valve with a tissue uh, aortic valve. And I literally woke up later that day with that exact same expression that Bill has in the movie, talking
Mm,
about waking up from surgery, where it's like, oh, fuck, shit's awesome.
yeah, I'm back.
This is rad. It's
Yeah.
rad being alive. This is cool. But, you know, it's just one of those things. And like for me, I'm so happy that the healthcare system that we've got here, as flawed as it is,
Yeah.
because it is very flawed in so many ways, um, it was still able to extremely quickly figure out what was wrong with me, have the surgery, and ship me home. Like I was in the hospital from August 23rd to September 23rd, and when I got home, it was like night and day, like in terms of like everything. I went from being like super fucking angry and bitter about a lot of things all the time to, oh, cool, everything's fucking great.
Nice.
I I can, like, beforehand, if I walked half a block, it was like I am exhausted. As afterwards, when I walked that half a block and went back to the house, and it's just like, fuck, that was awesome. Tomorrow I'm going a full block, and then
Nice.
and now I just go for like ridiculously long walks where I listen to an entire episode of unscripted moments.
Dude, I know. And like the fact that you are, kind of using the podcast almost as like part of your soundtrack to your recovery. I mean, it's like one of the greatest thrills for me, watching you, have this experience of rejuvenation and rebuilding your life and, taking Keith and I along for the ride. I mean, it's really just a thrill for me totally to hear these stories and like see whenever you post on Facebook, you're like, oh, I listened to this episode. I'm like, oh my gosh, that's so great. I'm so happy that, like, I just love that. Like, that's why I've made this show, is because I just love making something and I love talking to people about it. So that it's just a thrill for me.
Yeah, like like, I'm not gonna lie, like I'm overly, generally speaking, I'm not a huge podcast listening person.
Yeah, you
Um,
said you like all your listening soundtrack, so it's all music and then our podcast. I'm like, oh my gosh, that's so cool.
yeah, but it's like I listen to various episodes of Witch Police Radio, and it's like, A, because I know Sam and he's a really great dude,
And it's a local
and
treasure.
exactly, and B, it's because you never know when you're going to find something new. And
Mm-hmm.
as a musically obsessed human, I obsess over finding new things. So that's just one of those things. And when I was in the hospital, you know, uh, Sam had and I saw you guys and Sam communicating with each other on Twitter on a regular basis.
Yeah.
And it was like, okay, I don't really have any Wi-Fi or data in the hospital, so I can't start listening yet.
Yeah.
I gotta
And
wait until I get home.
yeah, and then
And
like we were all in the same room together. I mean, that was just so cool.
yeah, and so I actually started listening to you guys September 24th, the day
Nice.
after I got out of the hospital.
Amazing.
And
Well, and then like 3 weeks later, we were at the show together.
yeah, and there's a funny part about that is my I went to that show with my old roommate, and he'd got tickets for it, somehow, because trying to buy tickets to Propaganda in Winnipeg is a crapshoot.
Yeah.
um so like I literally missed the entire live performances of Beef being in Propaganda,
Yeah.
because of how ridiculously quickly all the tickets always sell out. Like, uh, like I'm not 100% sure, but I think my live Propaganda viewing went from seeing the Today's Empire's Tomorrow's Ashes release party at the U of M,
Mm-hmm.
University of Manitoba, uh, show, and that was my first time seeing Todd with the band.
Yeah.
And and it's just one of those things where it's like, yep, this is exactly what I needed this band to be, and they just fucking ripped. And then the next time that I saw them was for the Victory Lap CD release party,
Nice.
and then the next time after that was when we were in the same room. But
Ah, man.
my old, but yeah, my old roommate had picked up tickets, and we were on a Zoom call with a couple other friends, and And he just looked at me and and just goes, I know you just got out of the hospital, but do you still want to go? Like, you're very fragile at this point in
Mm-hmm.
time. Do you want to go? And I just remember saying back, like, well, fuck yeah. That's just one of the things that I was looking forward to in the hospital. Is like part of the, part of the whole looking forward to things, like, aspect of things was like, I am looking forward to going to go see Propagandy when I get out of the hospital. And he's like, okay, sounds good. We'll figure this out. And sure enough, we were there, and it was fucking mayhem, and it was awesome. And as soon as things went mayhemic, uh, myself and him, because he's also had a few health issues over the years, just went, okay, we're both fragile. We are moving to the back. And we just sat and watched them from the back, and it was just fucking awesome and so fucking rad.
I mean, and I think that was the first show, one of the first shows in the newly renovated Park Theater as well. So,
Yeah,
you
it was
know,
opening weekend for that.
yeah, I mean, that was just so special. And I feel so lucky that I just took the plunge and went on that trip. I've been so happy. I think about it regularly and I just kind of chuckle to myself because when Keith and I started the podcast, neither one of us had ever been to Winnipeg, even though I lived in Saskatoon for a while. I had never made the trip over. And so my first time ever going to the city was seeing Propagandy. And I have no regrets about that in any way, you know?
Oh, absolutely. Like, my only regret about that show was entirely, based on the fact that I was still so fragile coming out of the hospital.
Yeah.
And it was literally, I'm looking across the room and I'm like, holy shit, there's that like 7 foot tall, lanky dude that's Greg.
Yeah.
I see Greg. Um, I want to go over and say hi to Greg and introduce myself, but there are just way too many people, and I'm just way too fucking fragile.
Dude, I know. And it was packed in there and everybody was in masks from the pandemic. And so it was just, I had the hardest time socializing with people because I was like yelling through my mask for essentially 3 days in a row. And
Yeah,
when I got home, I was fried. I was so exhausted from that trip because it was, 3 days of yelling through a mask in a crowded show. And it was hard. I have no regrets, but it was challenging, that trip. So I hope the next time I come back, things are a little more relaxed as far as like being able to freely socialize. So that's where I feel like our paths will cross for real.
absolutely. And worst case scenario, we got Sam's backyard.
Absolutely, man. Have you met his dog before?
Oh yeah, his dog
Oh
is
my
fucking
gosh.
crazy.
I am obsessed with Sam's dog. I always try to come up with new ways to describe the size of Sam's dog's head. And one of my favorites is like microwave head, watermelon head. So, I love that dog. It's so, so sweet. Well,
Yeah, Freya is an absolute fucking great dog.
yeah. Well, Chris, I have absolutely loved our chat. Thank you so much for, joining me to chat about not only the music that you make, but your process for making this Portage la Prairie cover, and telling some stories from throughout your musical journey and being a part of the Winnipeg scene. I'm really glad that we got to do this and hang out and, include a cover of by far the weirdest Propaganda song that exists. And the fact that you just went for it and made it for me, it's just a real delight. So thank you so much for everything you've done for the podcast, for not only enjoying it, but for becoming friends with me and, you know, just being a part of
Everything.
just being a part of the journey of the show. It's just been really awesome being your pal, man. So thank you so much for doing this with me.
No problem. Thanks for having me.
Hey, Keith and Greg. This is Chris Friesen from Winnipeg, Manitoba, North America, Canada. First and foremost, thank you very much, Greg, for talking to me the other day. That was fun. It was a blast. But I fucked up and I forgot to tell you a story. And I hope you'll indulge me with a small appendix to my interview with you, Greg. So when I was wheeled into the operating room for the heart surgery, I was told by one of the surgical team members that they like to listen to music while they're doing the procedures, and if there was anything that I would like to listen to while I was going under, because obviously I wasn't going to be able to listen to it and listen to music while getting the operation. He said, you know, if we got it, we'll throw it on for you, whatever you want to hear. And my brain immediately went, Rhyme of the Ancient Mariner by Iron Maiden. So the anesthesiologist just, you know, immediately behind me goes, nice! And somebody else on the surgical team just kind of, you know, loudly says, oh, that's fine, but I get next pick. And somebody else yelled out, but none of that Garth Brooks crap. To which myself, lying on the operating table, goes, but I think Chris Gaines will be fine. And the Garth Brooks fan just went, oh great, we have a wise ass in here. So that's the first part of the Iron Maiden Rhyme of the Ancient Mariner story. The first show that I saw after getting out of the hospital, which me and Greg talked about, was going to go see Propaganda at the Park Theater. Shortly thereafter, Chris released the Patreon compilation of songs, and one of the songs that he covers on there is Iron Maiden, Wasted Years. So I just thought that was a nice little full circle moment for me within Propaganda and that period of time. And thanks for indulging me for this extra appendix and addendum, as it were. Propaganda rules. Talk to you later. Bye.